wabarakatuh. Welcome to Bristol Muslim Cultural Society's part one of two webinar on death and burial rites. So this is going to be a brief perspective, a Bristol perspective into coronavirus, the circumstances, and we'll also be covering the procedure for burial and how that procedure's changed in these challenging times. There'll be a live Q&A afterwards, inshallah. So yeah, stay tuned. My two speakers today are Sheikh Feroz. Sheikh Feroz sits on the British Board of Scholars and Imams, and we're also joined by Shahid Akram, Funeral Director and Southwest Coordinator for National Burial Councils. Sheikh Feroz, could you please open up with some words from the Holy Quran?
Yes, first and foremost, Jazakallah khair and Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. It's a pleasure being on to definitely talk about a very, very important subject, a subject that every single one of us is going to face. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, first and foremost, we start with A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajeem, bismillahir rahmanir rahim. Allahumma la ilma lana illa ma 'allamtana innaka antal alimul hakim. Alhamdulillahi rabbil alameen wassalatu wassalamu ala ashrafil anbiya'i wal mursaleen. Walhamdulillahi rabbil alameen. Bismillahir rahmanir rahim. تبارك الذي بيده الملك وهو على كل شيء قدير الذي خلق الموت والحياة ليبلوكم أيكم أحسن عملا وهو العزيز الغفور صدق الله العظيم. One thing that I would like to mention, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has reminded us a number of times, and even Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam has reminded us a number of times, that where Allah says in the Quran, Kullu nafsin dha'ikatul maut, that every single living thing that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has created is going to experience death. Every one of us is going to die one day. Now, the understanding, there are a number of ayahs, Kullu man alayha fan, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about this repeatedly. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala also reminds us from a theological perspective, and when you're looking at it from the perspective of what happens when a Muslim dies, what do we go through? What are the things that we should do before our death and how we should prepare? Our preparation and our purpose of life is to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and our purpose in life and the reason why we were created was so that we can worship Allah and be obedient to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now, when we're obedient to Allah Rabbul Izzah Rabbul Alameen, that means that we are acting in accordance to what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has asked us to do, according to the Quran, following the hadith of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam, following the sunnah, the way that the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wasallam actually taught us to live our life. Why? Because when the time of death comes, no one knows. And no one knows why, when, how someone is going to pass away. And one thing that I really want to emphasize, especially during this time, which we are in a time of a pandemic. We are going through a pandemic, there's no doubt, right? Every one of us throughout the world, not just in Bristol, is confined to our own home, right? We're in what we call quote unquote lockdown mode. And subhanAllah, there was something, and I know I shouldn't be joking, but there was something that my wife's uncle just recently messaged. He just mentioned to her, Ayub uncle. He said, he's a magistrate, and he said, I have put so many people in lockdown, and now I myself am in lockdown. He's a judge that put people in. But my wife countered, and she said that, this lockdown is a lot better than the lockdown of going to jail. But this lockdown, I look at it in a perspective of, it's really given all of us a chance to not only reconnect with our families, but because the closure of the masjid and all of the sudden, the reality that I cannot go outside, I cannot engage in those acts that I normally engage in, has now brought about where it is allowing us to focus on the key factor, which is Islam. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, for those of us, and every one of us should be going to Salat al-Jum'ah on Fridays when the lockdown is not in place, those of us that are Muslim. And there's a verse that you always read as a khatib you're advised to read. Even when someone is getting married, there's a verse that we are advised to read according to the Sunnah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, where Allah subhanahu wa taala, He says, "Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu." Actually, Allah, sorry, I was going to read a different ayah. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that, Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu taqullaha wa qulu qawlan sadida yuslih lakum a'malakum wa yaghfir lakum dhunubakum wa man yuti' Allah faqad faza fawzan 'azima. And then in another ayah where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He says, Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu taqullaha حق تقاته ولا تموتن إلا وأنتم مسلمون. That, don't, oh you who believe, don't go, don't come towards death where you're going to be not on the right path. Be on the path of truth before the time of death comes to you. And that encompasses everything that we need to focus on, right? When we pass away, and I know there's a lot of concern that, oh gosh, what happens when we pass away? The soul leaves the actual body. The ruh leaves the physical body that Allah has given us as an amana. It's a trust that Allah has instilled in us. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, in a hadith of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, many of our family members, many of those who have family members that are in the hospital, that are worried that, some may be COVID positive, some may be COVID negative, and they're worried. I'm not allowed to go inside of the hospital. Who's going to be with my mom? Who's going to be with my dad? Who's going to be with my uncle in case they pass away, or my aunt or my friend in case they pass away? Are they going to pass away alone? Allah Rabbul Izzah Rabbul Alameen. It's a beautiful, long hadith of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, very lengthy hadith, and I'm not going to go into the details of it, but just as an overview, the angels actually come down at the time of death, and the person that is passing away actually knows that they are going to go. They start to see the signs of death. And when you start to clearly see the signs of death, a person that's going through that is known as a muhtadar, right? He is a person that is seeing the times of death. And it's advised that when you see someone that is going there, it's permissible for that person to be laid down on his back, where either his face are towards the Qibla, and his head is slightly raised, where you place a cushion down where they're facing the Qibla. Now, you may say, yeah, but are we going to be able to do that when someone is in the hospital? Those circumstances we should not be worried about. The reason why we should not be worried about that is because the time that we go, the manner in which we go, this is all written, this is all ordained by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And one thing that I want to make sure that everyone gets an understanding of is we need to prepare ourselves for that day. We don't die because of COVID. That's just a means of our passing away. Just like when someone passes away with a heart attack, that is just the means or the excuse, but your time had already been written that you're going to pass away at that time. So we should not keep that as something that we're scared of, that we're going to face. As long as we prepare before that day, then we will be in the right state of mind when that comes for us and for our families. Now, how should we prepare? Right? What are the preparations that we should do? First of all, we should try to enjoy in good deeds, act of good deeds as much as we can. Pray your 5 daily salah on time. Try to pray them in jama'ah. When the masjids open up, for the brothers, try to be in the masjids. Try to go to the masjid, right? The other aspect is Ramadan is coming up. Fast in the month of Ramadan. Make sure you pay your zakah on time and calculate your zakah properly, right? The other aspect is have good relations with everyone. You can have good relations. You can be upset with someone or disagree with someone, but still maintain good relations with that person whether it's, and especially with your family members, like brothers and sisters, the bond of silatul rahim, you have to keep that intact, because you don't want where you're upset with someone and they pass away and you're not able to tell them how you really feel about them. Constantly talk to your parents, constantly talk to your mom and dad, make them happy, right? Resolve issues that you have from amongst one another. The other aspect is when you do things, do acts of charity that will not only benefit you at that time, but that charity which will constantly benefit you even after you pass away. Because once we pass away, our book of deeds are closed, right? And once our book of deeds are closed, subhanallah, there is nothing else that we can do that will reward us except that we have left something in charity that will be ongoing, like building a water well, building a masjid, right? Doing something that will constantly help the community, leaving some sort of knowledge behind that will benefit the community. Also, having, if you have children, if Allah blesses you with children, having righteous, pious children that will continuously make dua for us, that will make dua for you. And if you've had experience where your mom and dad have passed away, or your family members have passed away, give sadaqah on their behalf. Do things that will constantly benefit you. One of the things that you have to prepare for death, and one thing that I always find, and it becomes an aspect of dispute, because when you pass away, everything that we've earned in this world, all these worldly things that we kill ourselves to acquire, the house that you're living in, eventually someone else will live in that house. The money that we have amassed and acquired, someone else is going to spend that money after you pass away, right? The cars that you've acquired, if you've amassed more than one or two cars, that's more than what you need, someone else is going to drive that car. So when you're working, when you're purchasing something, think about, how much do I really need this? When you go to buy clothes, how much am I going to really need this? And can I spend this money somewhere better? Is there someone else that is more in need of me to have this money? When you do that, you then start to prepare yourself for the inevitable day that all of us are going to face. And that is when the angel of death comes. We're going to, Malak al Maut, when he comes, we're going to face him and we're going to pass away. Now, the question is, have we prepared our wills? How many of us have actually written out our assets that we have, our bank accounts that we have, if we've got multiple bank accounts? What have we written our wills out? And again, I encourage you to write your will according to the way Islam has taught us, according to the way the Sharia tells us to write your will, and do it in that manner. Enjoin your trusted person, right, to have the will written so that the administrator is a just person, right? The other aspects that you have to think about is, make sure you keep something in your account. For example, I know there are funeral committees, masjid committees that take funeral, because there are costs to burying yourself, right? You won't be able to pay for it. Someone else is going to have to pay for that. So you need to go and prepare for that aspect. Now, that's the preparation aspect, right? In terms of getting ready for preparation from the dunya perspective, make sure from the spiritual perspective, you're constantly in the remembrance of Allah, where you're saying, always keep your tongue moist with the dhikr of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And one of the best dhikrs that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, Subhanallah wa bihamdi, Subhanallah al-azim, that this is a dhikr that fills up the scales. Do things that will keep you, so that when the time of death comes, saying La ilaha illallah Muhammadur Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam is easy for that to come up. The declaration of Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah wa ashhadu anna Muhammadan abduhu wa rasuluh is easy for your tongue to actually say, because the proclamation is not something that is repeated on the tongue. It's based off of your actions in which you were engaged in. We'll get to the point of what happens when we in our graves, inshallah, in a part 2 series. I want to give the floor to Brother Shahid Akram, who is a brother from he's a very dear friend of mine, and a brother from Bristol. He's also the Southwest director for the National Burial Council. I want him to come in. I want him to talk about what is the current situation in Bristol with regards to the procedures that are taking place for those that are passing away. And then afterwards, I would like to come back in to talk about the various discussions around ghusl. What are the rights of those that pass away? What must we do as a community when someone passes away? What is fard upon the community, which is known as fard al-kifaya? What is fard al-ain? What is incumbent upon every single person in the community? Is ghusl fard al-ain or fard al-kifaya? And what are the processes that we're going to do? So right now, Brother Abdul Aziz, I'm going to give it off to you. And if you can please bring in Brother Shahid Akram and introduce him so that we can get into what I call the meat of the conversation, inshallah.
Yeah, sure. Assalamu alaikum. Brother Shahid, can you hear us?
Yeah, assalamu alaikum. I can hear you now.
Assalam. It's good to see you. I'm sure many of the viewers and people from Bristol recognize Shahid. Shahid, could you just give a brief background into yourself and what you do here in Bristol, especially with regard to the burials, the Muslim burials?
Okay, bismillah. Assalamu alaikum. Bismillahir-Rahmanir-Rahim. So basically, I've been working, as a lot of you know, in this sector as a volunteer to start with many years ago, maybe coming up to 15 years now, maybe more. SubhanAllah, assisting the community in the difficult aspect of burial. At the time when I got involved, things were very different. There were a lot of delays, a lot of factors that came into play. There were good links with council, cemeteries, but I think they needed to be developed or streamlined, and better communication really needed to take place. And alhamdulillah, that's where myself and various other brothers got involved with the process to assist the community at a time of difficulty, you know. And basically, in a long, because I could tell you about myself for a long time, as you know, some of you know, when I start talking, it goes on, so I won't do that. But in long and short of it is, alhamdulillah, now we're in a position where we have streamlined our services, our links with coroners, registrars, cemeteries, council, and everything we need to be in a good position with is, alhamdulillah, now in fruition. So we're in this situation now where we need it to work. Alhamdulillah, I've also been given the joint responsibility of National Burial Council representation for the Southwest. So subhanAllah, this is quite a challenge in itself. It wasn't something I was expecting, I've got to be honest. But due to the nature of how this thing has started and how big it's become, the NBC core group have decided that it's better we break it up into regions. You know, so that's a bit about me and how I've come to this point. My normal job is I'm a car salesman, believe it or not. I run a company in Bristol, so I don't do death all the time, alhamdulillah. But I'm always there for the community, as well as the masjids, as well as the death committees, and I've provided support along with my key associate brothers like Ramir Sharif and various others, and we've tried our best in situations to overcome it. And alhamdulillah, if we go into the current situation we have right now with COVID, which as you know is doesn't discriminate, it affects all of us. And as the Sheikh said, you know, it is something we need to be very strong and clear about, and how we can move forward. One of the reasons I think this seminar was set up is to alleviate the concerns a lot of people might have, because although a lot of work has been done in this field, the community is still a little bit unsure on whether we're prepared, whether we're in a good position with our cemeteries and all the other agencies I've mentioned. So alhamdulillah, if I go into that now, if that's okay, is that good enough for a background, Yaz, Aziz?
The background was good, alhamdulillah. I think we've also been given a memo to go into the brief background as to how Muslims conduct janazas, how do they conduct the ghusl. Perhaps you and Sheikh can both tag team this and inform viewers who don't know what happens in a Muslim burial, a Muslim ghusl, and then perhaps contrast that against what the current situation is, and really looking at how this current situation has affected Muslim practices, because there definitely have been a lot of scaremongering, especially on Facebook and WhatsApp. So perhaps you can address those scaremongering claims as well.
Okay, inshallah.
Okay.
All right. So yeah, I appreciate where you're coming from there. So let's deal with the scaremongering thing first, because I think people, the blood pressure will come down there. It's mine certainly will. So I mean, if I refer to one, for example, which is the most famous one, the body bag syndrome, where this brother has sent us a video. Forgive me, Sheikh. Where the brother sent a video and he's claimed that there's 32 bodies piled up in Lewisham, I believe, South London, and if we don't produce body bags, then they're going to cremate them. So subhanAllah, we looked into this in great detail. National Burial Council, whereas various brothers approached, we found this guy and we went to see him and we asked, what the real situation was. And subhanAllah, the brother, he is a Muslim brother. He does do funerals for other communities as well. And the issue was very different to what was presented. The issue simply was that at the time, he refused to collect the bayat unless they had a body bag. Okay, and this is a grey area. The World Health Organization, as well as the government now, as you can see today, are relaxing some of the issues around body bags, and where NHS doesn't have them, there's no legal requirement for them to have them. So funeral directors like this particular one decided that I am not going to collect them. And there was a comment made by a nurse just in passing. Okay, well, fair enough. If they don't get collected, then he claims that she said that they might be, cremated. Subhanallah. This is now all being rectified because millions of body bags were sent to his direction, and the issue, okay, subhanallah, issue soon became apparent that it was fake news. Okay, under no circumstances, under the current legislations, can the government turn around and tell us as a Muslim community that we have to be cremated. Okay, so alhamdulillah, at the very beginning of this epidemic, this issue came about. As you all know, most of you signed things and it went to Parliament. Naz Shah pushed it through. Allah be pleased with her and various other people. And alhamdulillah, the government agreed to look at the faith-based issues. You must remember it affects us as well as the Jewish community. Yeah. So this has now been overcome. All right, now alhamdulillah, we are not in a position, so please stand down and rest at ease that unless things go completely off the scale, which we don't expect them to do, then we are not going to be in a position where there's going to be any cremations. Okay, so inshallah, if I move into, is that good enough, Aziz? Yeah.
Oh, perfect. Yeah, exactly. Hopefully, it delayed many concerns.
Yeah, because that's a massive concern. If you can imagine somebody sitting there, small family in a remote place, listening to something like that,
sure,
it can be heart wrenching. So alhamdulillah, we're in a very good position in terms of a community, because if we go into how we work and how we do our janazas, alhamdulillah, if I just bring an example element in, because we're on various panels that have been designed to assist us in Bristol, alhamdulillah. We have an executive panel. We also set up the resilience panel. There's other funeral directors, Muslim funeral directors, as well as the non-Muslim funeral directors that sit on a big panel in Bristol and surrounding areas to cope with this epidemic. And one of the things they've asked us is like, how can we deal and storage-wise and how much facilities we have. But alhamdulillah, we're in a position where we do not plan to use storage. We shouldn't really plan, in my opinion, to use storage, because alhamdulillah, Allah has given us this system, of fast burials. Okay, we have to be as fast as we can under the conditions to be able to get the documentation, okay, to get buried. So we're not really planning, inshallah, to tap into mass storage facilities unless we really have to. Okay, so if I start with the processes of where we are, okay, if we look at a normal circumstance, okay, if somebody is unwell medically, okay, and they're either shifted to hospital or they are at home, okay, and what the medical profession would class this as end of life stages. Okay, so we would then look at it as an expected death, all right, where the doctors say that, look, there's not much more we can now do for this patient, and we need to start making provisions, whether you want to be at home or in hospital, okay? And this can be the case in some current cases as well, where doctors will allow them to come home, right? But at that point in time, we now, as a community, know that somebody we love is in that predicament. Okay, so my advice to you at this particular moment in time is to consider what Sheikh Feroz has said, about the relationships and all these other things, and how we're going to arrange where we're going to bury. We get lots of calls saying, look, there's a new site in Bristol, for example, Meadows of Peace. What do you think? Should I buy a plot there? And my response to them always is, look, if you come to my showroom to buy a car, or you go to buy a house, most of the time, if you can travel there, you're going to go and you're going to see the product, or in this case, you're going to see the land. And that is what we advise people is, look, go to the location and see what you think, because we've got two options here: South Bristol Cemetery, near Bristol Airport, and we've got, which is council run, and we have the Meadows of Peace, which is a private cemetery. Okay, so those are issues we all need to think about at that time. Going back to the doctor and the medical scenario is, at that point in time, we think it's good for you to make contact with your masjid, your deaf committee, your funeral director, whoever you know who can give you the right support or make those communications for you. Okay, because at that point, really, you need to be prepared. All right, so under the current circumstances, if I said to you, we haven't really got masjid storage at the moment, right, due to something we're going to talk about a bit later, due to the conditions and regulations. So we need to think about these things so we're all prepared, and the people that need to know are in a position to respond at that particular time. So if we look at the house setting, okay, and we're at home and someone passes away at home, now we're very much hoping that the patient, the representation of the patient, the family, have contacted the GP, and there's constant communication with the GP, okay, because there's a ruling that a doctor signing that certification must have seen the patient within 14 days of this patient passing away. Okay, now the government have just extended that to 28 days. All right, and they've also put some more parameters in, saying, look, it doesn't necessarily have to be the doctor that's seen the patient. Okay, under some circumstances, that doctor can authorize and open a case, for example, on an out-of-hours system and say, look, I've video seen this patient, I've seen the notes, I'm happy over the weekend for another GP with a GMC number to write this medical certificate. Okay, so that is quite an important aspect, because that's hurdle number one, is probably the biggest hurdle, because if we can't get the what we call the medical cause of death certificate, then we are not in a position to move any further. Okay, now if this becomes a case where the doctor hasn't seen the patient in the last, let's say, extended to the whole 28 days, right, then we've got a slight issue there, because if the doctor, the GP, or the doctor, the last person to see the patient, hasn't got a string of underlying conditions, okay, then the doctor is not in a position to say, okay, I'm satisfied it was item 2 and 3, and I'm happy to write this certificate. You can see the doctor's position is quite a difficult one. Okay, so at that point, it more than likely will get referred to the coroner. Okay, now in which case, then the coroner's officers will make a decision, and in the meantime, the deceased will be collected and go into coroner care. Don't worry at this stage. This doesn't mean you're going to have a post-mortem, but that is the protocol. Okay, until the coroner can communicate with the GP or the last medical practitioner, then that coroner is not in a position to sign off. Now, in that scenario, if it's a worst case scenario, and they cannot come to a decision on what has caused this death, then we are into a new protocol where the coroner moves forward and has to conduct some sort of investigation, leading possibly into a post-mortem, all right, to discover why. And the reason for that is, just, for example, is I dropped dead of something, right, and then it's not, then it could go on, Allah save us, it could go on and infect other people, you understand? So in England, that is the rules. And there's not a lot we can do to challenge that. However, there is a new system, the MRI scanning, which alhamdulillah is very new. It's going to be rolled out in the next 5 to 10 years across the UK. We have some private establishments we work with. We have done several MRI scans, and this is your legal right. Under the current conditions, I'm not sure if we're able to exercise it, because a lot of the current conditions have changed. Okay, so just bear that in mind and don't let it panic you, but it's good to know the medical position. So if we go back and we said, okay, we've got the MCCD from the doctor now, okay, or if that hasn't worked, then the hospital visit that happened a week or so before. Normally when someone's transferred from hospital to home. And one of the protocols is for the hospital to contact the GP and the people of care and out of our services saying, guys, we're transferring care from the hospital. Okay, so that's normally a clearly documented transfer. In that case, it assists us in making sure we got that document. Now, once we have that medical certificate of death, MCCD, and what happens at that point, we send that now, instead of us going physically to the registrar, alhamdulillah, we have 7 days a week access. There's no point calling them in the middle of the night because there's no benefit. So we call them first thing in the morning and say, look, this is what's happened, or if it's happened during the day in office hours, what will happen is that MCCD now is scanned both sides and is sent to the registrar. Okay, the registrar, it also expects a form which we send to the family to fill out. It's very simple: name, address, occupation, wife's occupation, date of birth and stuff like that. Okay, and these sort of basic information, what they do then is to speed up the process, is pre-set it up on their systems. Dedicated phone numbers are given, and then the registrar, once it's set up, will phone the family, the contact, which you must remain. There's the number you give them. There's no point, making it clogged, because if you miss that call and they go to others, that causes delays. Okay, so it's good to have a standalone number with good reception or a landline. Keep it free. All right. So once that process is completed, then that produces what we call the burial order. Okay, and the burial order is the legal document that we need anywhere in the country to be able to bury anybody. All right. So without that document, we cannot move forward. It's improper for us to, for example, if I say it's a Sunday morning and I'm ringing around, the family asks me, look, get this done and get this booked, and now we want to let family know and all sorts of other things. We can't make those protocols. So we have the doctor, the registrar. Once that's done, then we're in a position to contact the cemetery. There's no point us contacting the cemetery at stage number one, because we're not in a position to bury. Okay, so alhamdulillah, we are fast tracking these first three to get to the cemetery, and once we get
interject quickly, how many of these types of has the timeline for this process been extended during this coronavirus?
To be honest, no. So alhamdulillah, we always had 7-day access, okay, apart from one of the cemeteries, South Bristol. So this is basically just streamlined it a little bit more, because obviously there's no face-to-face with the registrar now. The registrar,
any delays or anything like that?
No. So alhamdulillah, as long as we've got the form ready and we've got phone line free, and we've trialed this for 2-3 different cases in the last 10 days, alhamdulillah, they went very smoothly, and the document was produced. Okay, so at that point, we can book the cemetery. Sheikh, did you have a question?
Yeah, I just wanted to find out now. This is obviously the process that is going on now, but could you explain what the process is in terms of COVID positive, COVID negative, and family members that actually pass away at home? Because this is a lengthy process, right? But what is the actual process going on right now for those that are COVID positive, negative, and those that pass away at home, where more than likely they're COVID negative?
Yeah, it's exactly the same as what I've just said. Okay, it's a very interesting question. Okay, because if we reverse up 20 days, okay, and we look at this scenario when we started seeing death, we had a lot of death in the first week of this. As you know, we had 9 janazas, 4 were babies, subhanallah, and we had to treat them all as COVID. Right, so our team.
How many of those 9 were COVID?
2. 2 of them were COVID.
2 of them COVID.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's just, Allah's way of doing things, but maybe whatever He's written, obviously, is what's going to happen. But we were quite shocked to have that amount of death, obviously, in the first week. And sometimes, the coroner we had a meeting with the other day mentioned that, look, they're not confident that all cases are, being registered correctly. Okay, so for example, if someone dies at home from COVID, then obviously that presents a massive issue for the whole family, okay, because we then have a duty of care, okay, to make sure we self-isolate. That means we cannot attend the janazah. So that opens up a whole new tin of emotions here now, because obviously we're stuck in the home. We have someone who's infected in the home as well. So that opens up a completely new scenario in terms of, what happens with the ghusl. We'll move on to that in a second. But in terms of the registration,
but that does bring up a question for me. I'm sorry, I'm interjecting, but I'm sorry, I'm getting text messages with questions on my phone. If you can direct the questions to I don't know what platform we're using, but if it's Facebook that you're on, I'm getting a ton of questions. But one question actually did come up is, say someone did pass away at home and they did have COVID. What is a procedure, or didn't have COVID? I think it applies to both. Is the ambulance going to take them to the hospital, and then you collect, or you guys collect? What's the actual process of that?
So it'll be exactly the same as I mentioned. Okay, now with a COVID thing, to be honest with you, normally we would have that notice, the symptoms would be there, people would have medical assistance, and the test may actually be carried out at home, right? But if they're in that predicament where the medicals, obviously this is a question for doctors, feel that they can give them medical intervention or like ventilators and stuff like this, then obviously there'll be a transfer to hospital. So most of these type of cases we would expect to happen at hospitals, unless we're talking about someone who's extremely frail, not able, and the family are insistent that no, we don't want them to go to hospital. We have heard of cases where people stay at home, but the process of the registration and the documentation is exactly the same. Okay, what changes there is the family on how they can physically carry out that janazah. And the reality of the situation is, we had one recently, of someone who passed away, a tragic case of a dear uncle, and the family, majority of them, could not attend the janazah. We done it ourselves, Sheikh, that one in South Bristol. So they were in a predicament where they had to self-isolate, and only certain members of the family could attend the janazah. And as you know, we're only limited to 10 people at the qabristan, at the cemeteries. So this poses that particular scenario, and it puts it into play where we have to self-isolate, and we must look at the scenario. There has been some cases where around the country people have insisted, and they've turned up, okay, on the cemetery grounds. We know they're infected as funeral directors, and they have gone around and they've infected other people. Okay, so this is something which is tragic. Okay, we had a situation in Birmingham the other day where people decided to, either the gate was locked, jump over and shout vile abuse and all sorts to cemetery staff, and the response from the councillors was, guys, we really need to start behaving here, or we just have to have 0 people at cemeteries. But we must appreciate this. We're never been programmed to deal with this scenario. We could never envisage the world getting into this state it's in now, where we can't do the most basic of things.
I wanna come in on this, Brother Shahid. Subhanallah, when Allah says Lakum dinukum waliyadin, I've completed and perfected your deen today. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has already taught us about all of these aspects. And what baffles me is, because I've done a few janazas, right, that were COVID positive. And what baffles me is when you do see those that are infected within the same household. We don't know if they're infected or not, but they were in the same household. Most likely you are infected. And they show up to the actual janazah. And I want to remind them, all of this has been talked about in hadith. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, in a sahih hadith, he said that if you have a camel that is sick, right, do not take that camel to the watering hole where other non-sick, healthy camels are. Do not take the camel there, right? If he's placing that stipulation down for an animal, that multiplies for us, where we should not put someone in danger in terms of where it's going to cause them a problem. The self-isolation aspect is very clearly written out in the hadith, and I'm sure many people mention this because, unfortunately, in times of tragedy is when we turn and we say, oh, look, the health service is saying we need to self-isolate, don't leave the house, do this. Oh, but by the way, look, the Prophet ﷺ said that. The whole system of life, everything has been mentioned in hadith, every single one of us. Rasulullah ﷺ said that if you're in a city where a plague is, don't leave that city. And if there is a plague in another city, don't enter that city. And in the conversation that we had with regards to welcoming Ramadan, If you know that there is someone who is sick, and in that hadith, it's specifically mentioning a leper, that you should maintain a distance that is 1 spear length long. That is about 1.5 to 2 meters. All of these things have actually been laid out in hadith by our beloved sallallahu alaihi wasallam. We must adhere. If you don't want to adhere to the government, I'm sorry, but that's wrong. That goes against the principles of what Islam teaches, right? But if you want affirmation that what you're being advised, it should actually increase our iman, our faith, that the Prophet ﷺ already mentioned this. He said this is the manner in which we should go about doing this. People complain saying that, oh my God, our masjids are closed. It kills me. Man, I'm a person that loves the masjid. I like being at the masjid as much as I can, especially for Fajr, Maghrib, Isha. That's my, little getaway place, right? In terms of spiritually, I want to be there. But in certain circumstances, you have to shut the masjids down also in order for you to protect oneself. There are things that you can say, yeah, but my iman is that if I'm going to get it, yeah, I'm going to get it. But you also have to tie your camel. The Prophet ﷺ said, adhere to those aspects. And if people are not adhering to those aspects, I know you want to see someone that you love to be buried. And, I was going to, like I said in the beginning, I was going to mention the hadith in part 2 about what actually happens when someone passes away. But I think it's more suitable to answer to say it now, if you don't mind, right? Is at the time of death, when you're muhtadar, right? At the time of death, and by the way, you can find this description in detail. This was in Kitab al-Ruh, written by Ibn Qayyim, right? Rahmatullah alayh, an amazing scholar. And I'm doing this off of memory, so I may not get the exact hadith down packed because I'm going to paraphrase it. It's a very long hadith, but and it's a hadith that's narrated by Al-Barra, right? Where Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he talked about the questioning how the slave goes up, and at the time of death, before the angel of death comes, the angels come down. There's a group of malaikas that actually come down and they start to sit around the person that is about to pass away. This is the good soul that is going to pass away, that has done good. And when they're there, they are as bright, and the description is so beautiful in the hadith where Rasulullah SAW said the angels' faces are brighter than the sun when they descend down from Jannah, from the heavens, and they stack up one on top of the other. Why do they stack up on one on top of the other? When they're already stacked, immediately Malakul Maut, he comes down, and then he says to the person that is about to pass away, he says, "Oh, good soul, come with me. Come out towards maghfirah, towards forgiveness, and you've gained the pleasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala." And we all know that when a person passes away, for example, with a disease or a pandemic, they're classified as shaheed, as a martyr. So when a person is passing away in that state, they are coming out when they're saying, come out in a state of maghfirah. But look how beautiful the hadith gets even further down. His soul, when it's coming out of the body, it emerges like drops of water as it's coming out of the example that the Prophet ﷺ gave was like a water skin, right? Because they used to have water skin that they used to keep the water in. And drip by drip, the soul is taken out. And when the soul is taken out, ya subhanallah, the malaikas are rushing to grasp the soul and to carry the soul. And one by one, they start carrying the soul. And the angels don't leave. They're not even able to keep it within their hands because they have so much zeal in wanting to take the soul with them, to participate in them, that even a twinkling or the blinking of an eye, that length of time, it doesn't even stay within their hands, and they're taken all the way up. And then when they go and they're taken up, they're placed in a place where attar, the fragrance, is placed around them, and they're shrouded in perfume, like a cloud of perfume is placed, right? And it's sweet, this musk, the way the Rasulullah SAW described it, This musk is the sweetest scent of musk that you can find, and it's not even equal to that in the earth, right? So think of the most beautiful smell you've got, and now you're being shrouded in that. And then they carry taking it forward. And when they get to Jannah, the heavens, and the soul comes to the angels, Ya subhanallah, all of the sudden they ask, the malaikas that are in the heaven, they say, who is this person? Who is Fulan Fulan? And then those that are carrying the soul up, they say, now listen to this now, how important it is for us to do good, because the way we end and the way we are going to end our life is also going to reflect even on our parents. And it's narrated on this hadith where the Prophet ﷺ said that they bear it upwards, and then the malaikas, the gatekeepers, they say, the angels, they say, who is this soul? And they say, this is Fulan Fulan, the son or daughter of such and such person. Subhanallah. Then anything, right? Any good name that you were called. Oh, this person was so giving. This person was so merciful. They start to call by that name and start to give you that name. So even in Jannah, you're remembered by your character in which you left the world. When you get to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, all of a sudden Allah, he says, he says, register my slave as from amongst the Illiyin. And we don't have a lot of time, so I will tell everyone, go read Surah Bayyinah. Man, go read Surah Bayyinah. And part of Bayyinah is so beautiful, where it talks about how the Illiyin are going to be taken and how they're going to be greeted. And then what happens, the soul is returned back after you're registered from amongst the Illiyin, the righteous, those that have succeeded in the good. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala returns the soul back into the body when you get inside of your grave, when you're buried, right? And we'll go into what happens later on in part 2, but I just want people to understand that just because someone passes away, you think they're passing away alone, but we know that if someone has passed away because of, as a means, I don't want to say because of, but the means is COVID-19 or some pandemic or some disease, right? They're not passing away alone. Just because you're not there physically does not mean they're not in a company that are even better than us, right? They're in the company of the malaika. And then when brothers like Shahid, when other brothers that are funeral directors, when they go and they collect the bodies, right? And I want to mention something that I think is very important. Those of you that are at home, actually we'll get to that a little bit later on, but with the conditions that we're going to see and we're going to talk about that have been decided upon here in Bristol because of certain conditions, we don't want where the family members try to be gun-ho and try to do things on their own. Brother Shahid, I'm going to give this back off to you because I think there's another portion that we wanted to cover with regards to, the way that we should do the actual ghusl, right? The manner of doing the ghusl. Because when the body, you've described beautifully and in detail on the process that we go through. We go through a process where if someone passes away at home, you notify the court, you notify, the relevant authorities. They come over, you get the certification, then you go into the actual ghusl procedure, right? I'm not going to go into the detail of ghusl procedure. If anyone wants a copy of it, text BMCS or send your email to BMCS. There's a book that, inshallah, I am in the process of preparing about what happens and what to do in terms of ghusl. And in partnership with the BBSI, the British Board of Scholars and Imams, we are going to be publishing what to do in this current pandemic for doctors that need to do the ghusl at the hospital or tayammum at the hospital that are Muslims. We're about to publish a book with regards to that, if there are restrictions that certain cities or communities have. But look at the sanctity of the person that passes away that Islam places on them. We have to be respectful to every single person in living, but even when they die, now you become extra careful. Because that amana, that's mine. This body is my trust that Allah has given me, right? With this soul. I have to take care of it. not just spiritually, physically as well. We should be in good health. We should take care of our health. If we've got underlying conditions because of our eating habits or because of our bad habits in terms of certain habits that we have, whether it's smoking or doing other things that are harming our body, we need to get rid of those. We need to get rid of those habits. Why? Because this is an amana that Allah is. It's a trust that we have, and we have to take care of our body in our living. But now look at when a person passes away. Brother Shahid, let me ask you this, and I'm not questioning, I'm not grilling you on this, but I think and Abdulaziz, I think it's good to bring in you guys also. But when someone goes to have ghusl done, how should the water be for the person that's doing the ghusl? Or when you're doing the ghusl, how do you test the water?
So basically, we put our finger in, or we do a finger test where we pour it over. There has to be, basically, in a nutshell, what Sheikh's getting at here is we're treating the dead as if they are living. Okay, so we respect them, and although there is not a lot of concrete hadith, that's not my department with that, but somehow in our minds, Allah has programmed us to treat the dead as if they were still here with us right now. Okay, so everything we prepare for them, the way we deal with them, which was one of the main reasons we got involved. SubhanAllah, one of the elders in Eastern Jamia Masjid, when we were small children, he used to say to us, SubhanAllah, this he used to tell us off a lot as well. He said, when I die, I don't want no more than Muslims touching me. And I never really understood what he meant. It wasn't until he died himself, many years later in Pakistan, and subhanAllah, this brother died in sujood. Okay, and he was the Muslim of Eastern Jamia. This is going 30 years ago. And, it wasn't until then it clicked in my mind what this brother was actually talking about. And he was talking about the dignity of the dead person, and he wanted it to be all Muslim hands. Okay, and it said something to me. And I think what you're getting at there is pretty much along the same lines, that we need to ensure that when someone does pass away, it's dealt with people that we can trust, and we understand how we deal with the mayyit. And obviously, if it's a sister, we're not in a position to look at non-mahrams. So obviously that she has to be completely covered, and the family assist where they can. So there's a lot of conditions that we have to meet here.
So one of the conditions, for now, let me just jump in from the Islamic perspective, right? A male should give ghusl to a male.
That's right.
A female should give ghusl to a female. If a sister that is during her time, right, of month, she should not go to perform the ghusl, right? When you go in, the care that should be given, and there should be enough people, it shouldn't be done by two people or one person, or it should be enough people so that when you lift the body and you place them on the area where you're going to do the ghusl, you place that down. And what I always teach is, I always say, because typically we have a metal tray in which they lay in where we're going to do the ghusl, right? What I say is, look, you have to test the water before you place it on the body. So what I always suggest is take warm water and run it along the actual metal tray. Don't make it freezing cold. Don't let it be freezing cold. Warm the place up, right? Then place the body down, propping their head up. They've got, I think you have the stands not I think, I know you have the stands where you prop the head up, but check the water, that it's not too hot and it's not too cold. And the best way to do it, not just sticking the finger in, because your finger, the sensory aspects on your finger are lower. Check it with the back of your hand. And that's what Rasulullah SAW said. Pour the water on the back of your hand, right? See if the water is too cold or if it's too hot. Adjust the temperature. Don't rush in doing the actual ghusl, right? When you do that, also make sure that you are prepared. Everything is prepared. The camphor is prepared, the water is prepared, the cotton buds are prepared. And when a person passes away, for those of us that have never experienced this, where someone has passed away at home, immediately when you notice someone has passed away, it's a very tough time. It's a very tough time. The first thing you have is you want to cry. I remember when I experienced this with someone. first thing I was going to do was I nearly broke out crying out loud. But then I gathered myself because alhamdulillah, Allah had put me in a position where I had done a number of ghusls, where I'd gone to hospitals where people had passed away, being a roaming chaplain, right? Immediately when someone passes away, you close their eyes, right? And the manner in which you do it, and I'm taking off my glasses so I can't actually see myself, but the manner in which you do it is you take your fingers, and typically your two fingers, and you bring down, and you wipe down very gently. Don't tug on the eyelids, okay? And then when a person dies, in movies we see someone dies and they go, oh, right, that's how they died. That's not how it happened. So when a person dies, you need to close their eyes, and then gently you take a string. If you can get a piece of cloth, right, take it and wrap it around and tie so that their mouth stays closed. Because when the time of ghusl comes, because once the body becomes cold, it's very difficult to close someone's mouth or to maneuver the actual body, right? So go ahead and have the mouth closed, right? And have that tied. And that's going to remain tied throughout the whole process. If their limbs are bent, straighten out their limbs, but don't forcefully try to straighten out their limbs. Because if a person, for example, if a person passes away with a stroke, right, they may have where their arm is set in a certain position. Don't try to jerk it and yank it out, right? Lay them down. When you lay them down, lay them flat. Put their arms to the side, right? And typically, what you do is you put your arms cross over the belly. Okay, straighten out the legs, and then bring the two legs close together and tie around the ankles. And a lot of times, some people say, and some of the practices are where you tie around the toes, the big toe on the feet. You tie around it, and you tie around the ankles so that the legs stay straight. This makes it easy for us to be able to place the deceased into not just the grave, but also to perform the ghusl, right? When you do this, the person should constantly be safe. Just like you're in a state of hijab for women, the women should constantly be covered. Their hair, everything should be covered so that a non-mahram can't see them, right? Even when they're being transported. So before the ambulance or anyone comes, we should make sure that they're in that state if we've got it. And one thing, it just reminds me, and Ya Allah, may Allah, I know I've mentioned my dad and my mom a number of times, and may Allah bless my dad because he's a guy that's actually taught me so much. He's taught me so much in terms of practicality. My dad, we travel a lot. He travels with me for work, and my dad carries his coffin with him. And he always tells me when we get to the hotel room, Beta, this is where my coffin is. Son, that's where my coffin is, right? In case I pass away. And his coffin is actually the two sheets of cloth that he used in Hajj, and he's been using in Hajj for Allah knows how many years he's been doing Hajj for, right? But that's what he carries. That's the level of preparation that I need to learn. I'm not telling everyone else to. I need to learn, right? Now, when that happens, when the coroner is there, you have to respect the aspect of the hijab, all of those things. When Brother Shahid, yourself, Brother Amir, Hassan, Saeed, all the brothers that are helping you guys out, right? That are there, and I know their other brothers, Brother Sohail Aslam and Sister Roxana, the other companies in Bristol that are doing it, and all the brothers that are engaged in doing funerals. May Allah bless you guys.
Yeah.
And when you follow these guidelines, you're actually getting reward for doing these guidelines and following what the Sharia says. When sisters, brothers, when you give ghusl to a mayyit, it is haram. It is not permissible for you to go and tell another person what you saw, if they had a defect, if there was something that you saw, or if they died of some sort of skin ailment, or you're not allowed to reveal that aspect to anyone This is a trust that is entrusted upon you, and you have to stay quiet from what you see. Respect the dignity of the one that has passed away, right? The other aspects that you have to understand, the wailing and the crying, man, there's no doubt when someone you love passes away, you want to cry. And I encourage people to cry, but don't cry out loud and wailing, where the beating of the chest. We have to be composed. And there was a hadith of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam that, and I'll never forget this, when we were going through this in my classes, when I was doing my alim course class, right? And I remember going through this hadith where Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam is standing, and a woman, he's walking, and he comes across a sahabiya, right? A woman who has lost her child, and she's crying out loud, and Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam says, what has happened? She says, I've lost my child. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he then advised her. He says, my sister, have patience. Isbir, have patience. And she explodes and she says, what patience? I've just lost my child. You want me to be patient? You want me to be She just flips out. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, such a beautiful example for us that we have to follow. Smiles, doesn't respond, doesn't say anything, and he walks away. He's given the advice. Later on, someone comes to the Sahabiya and says, do you know who that person was? Do you know who that man was? Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. And she's told it was Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam that was giving you. And she says, oh, now I'll be patient. Word gets to the Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. She goes running back. And Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam said, patience is when you are patient in the first portion of the calamity. So we have to mentally prepare ourselves that when we face a certain aspect like this, that we are going to protect our own self from committing something that is disliked. And when you're dealing with families, Brother Shahid, I know you, ya subhanAllah, I know, because I get calls from you sometimes even at like midnight and 1 a.m. about what do I do? There's a situation. Can you jump on this? You've put me on a bunch of WhatsApp chats with regards to certain things that you've been accused of being insensitive and stuff. But what I want to get to now is, now that we've covered that, I haven't gone into detail, and we don't have time to go into detail, but I want to get to your aspect really quickly for 1 or 2 minutes, is regarding some of the difficulties that you guys face and some of the aspects that you need to explain that you normally don't get a chance to, because when you're in the moment, you're not able to say to someone. But what are things that you've experienced that you want others to know, and to let them know that, look, if you face yourself in this difficult time, please be mindful of 1, 2, 3.
Okay, Bismillah. So obviously, it's a very difficult thing. The first thing we say to ourselves, I mean, me and Brother Amr in the earlier days, we literally need to, before we need to go and collect somebody who was deceased, we literally had to mentally gear ourselves up. And sometimes it included slapping each other, So subhanAllah, it was really to prepare ourselves, and guys, what are we doing? The intention up here, we think, is the most important thing of why we're doing this and how we're doing it, and has to be done in a very dignified manner. And obviously, when we go into places where someone's passed away in a family home, for example, we have to be very patient, and we have to be very respectable. We have to give them their time. And obviously, we also, even though we may have just as much love for that person that's passed away ourselves as they do, we have to stay composed. Okay, we have to stay fully in control, because obviously if we also start becoming emotional and start losing our control in this element, then that has a trigger effect. And so because we got to stay very much composed and be in a position where we can carry out the path. See, this takes this. Sorry, please.
No, sorry, continue.
So in this predicament we're in now with the COVID situation, if we apply that to that, obviously, we're in a territory that we've never ventured for before. This is the sad bit about it. This is where we need people to be transparent, and assist us in doing this. So funeral directors, they're putting themselves on the front line and they're having to deal with whatever comes their way. Okay, so going into a scenario where someone's passed away from a COVID death, whether that is at a hospital or someone's residential home, the precautions we take, you're going to see people turning up with full respirators on, face masks, head covering, full body suits, gloves, Wellington boots. The problem we have is, like I was saying earlier in part two, is we have to treat every death as if it was COVID. And obviously, that's quite strange when you're walking into a setup. If you can imagine X amount of people in this home, and we've got a COVID situation going on, and obviously that presents us with a massive problem, okay, because potentially everyone in that whole house could potentially be affected. All right, so we have to tread very carefully. There's various protocols that we have to put in place, like the house has to be aired. So when someone passes away, instead of us keeping them cozy, okay, we have to keep them cool, okay, because we don't know the duration of the process with the paperwork. So we have to make sure that they're kept cool, that window's open. But when we enter the homes of these deceased, then normally, in honesty, under the current conditions, there won't be a lot of people there because of the happening. But some communities are a bit slower than others in responding to social distancing. So that presents us with a new problem. So we have to make sure that before we arrive on the scene, what we normally do is our vehicles are fully kitted up with all the stuff we need. So when we arrive there, there's a parking space ready, and we can assess what the situation is, find out what level on the house the maid is on, and all these sort of intricate details. In the meantime, we let the family have a body bag in case it's a non-mahram case, and we also ask them to tell us how many people are in the house, which at that point, when we're actually going to go in, when they're ready for us to transfer mayat and bring the mayat out, then we normally ask the family if there's a whole load of them. We had one a few weeks ago where there's maybe 80 people in a 2-bedroom semi-detached. You can just imagine, okay? This was at the very start of this epidemic. However, we had to treat them as COVID, so a lot of them had to come out of the house. The windows and the doors needed to be open and aerated. It was assisted, so they actually had to be transferred to the body bank themselves. We went in and done a transfer, and then we came out. So obviously we need that cooperation, but more importantly, what we said a couple of steps back was the fact of moving forward with that janazah. We had to social distance and all these other things. But I think the other obvious criteria are, we are dealing with someone who's passed away. Okay, this is not our everyday normal. We have to come across people that are emotional. Some of them can be quite angry. Some of them can be physically angry. Okay, so there's a lot of things a funeral director has to go through, which a lot of people don't really see that side of. And we just have to grit and bear. We can't respond, or aggravate a situation which is already quite tense. So we just have to try our best and remind people of that. Look, end of the day, what Allah has written was written when we were in our mother's tummies. Okay, so and we have to, and obviously Sheikh can enlighten us on that. So we have to be in that predicament and just to try keep people calm, collective, so we can carry out the task that we need to do.
So, Sheikh, brother has just mentioned what is written is written. I think this ties quite nicely into one of the questions we've had. One brother has asked that given that our time is written and is predestined, does that mean we can go out and continue as normal? He mentions that he hasn't been working because his mother's elderly, in her 80s, and is at risk. Knowing that the time of death is written is unavoidable, can he then go out and work? I can assume your answer already, but I'm going to let you take us through it.
So the Prophet ﷺ said that we must adhere to social distancing, not just the government, and we have to follow the guidelines of the government. The answer is no. Your children should not go out to work if they are going to be if there's going to be a possible issue where your children that go out to work may get infected and affect your mom. Right? Now there's a hadith, and this hadith we're actually going to go through and we're going to mention. The hadith states, and by the way, yes, before I get to the hadith, there's another hadith that says, have iman with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but tie your camel as well. You have to take the precaution before you put yourself in that situation, right? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has also given us aql. Now, no matter how much precaution you try, death is written, it's going to happen. And whether it's going to be with COVID or non COVID, that's going to happen. However, when you're in a situation where there's a possibility of you contracting that disease and bringing it home and spreading it within your family, you don't want to have that burden on your life, on your conscience, that it was me that went out when I should have actually tied my camel. In this current situation, I should have locked my door, right? Mal is also given by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Mal is wealth, right? Is also given by our Lord. How much we're going to get, what we're going to earn, what is going to be in our bank account is already written. And I mentioned this in the Ramadan talk. Don't worry about food, because Maryam radiallahu ta'ala anha, right? The daughter of Imran, alayhi salam, she's inside of a mihrab, and Allah subhanahu and Zakaria alayhi salam, he comes in and he says, "Hey, where'd you get this food that's out of season from and not even from here?" Anna laki hada, O Maryam radiallahu ta'ala anha. She said, "Qalat huwa min indillah." That it's Allah that's giving me. Allah will give us, right? There will be means and ways which Allah will give. So the short answer is, don't go outside. Now, there's a very important hadith which some scholars apply to the next section that we're going to get into, and we can flow into the next section. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has said that, I mean, not Allah, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, there's a hadith, there's an incident that took place in the time of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam where a man was extremely sick. He was a leper. He passes away. And some of the Sahaba, they say, no, you have to do ghusl. And they force a person to do ghusl. Now, as you know, leprosy is highly contagious just by touching, right? With no protective gear, nothing. He goes and he performs a ghusl. That person eventually gets the disease and he passes away. And they go back and they report it to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, upon hearing this, gets angry. This is rahmatul lil alameen, a mercy to all mankind. He gets upset and he says that, have you killed this man? I mean, this is Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam saying, have you killed this man? Right? So we need to be mindful that if I'm going out and I've been told not to go out, but subhanAllah, I'm still, especially if I've got enough and I'm still going out to work when I should be at home, spend that time with for your children, with your grandmother. Man, I've lost all my grandparents. My God, how I wish I could get that time back. Gosh, wallahi, if I could, if I was in the lockdown with my grandparents and my parents and my wife's parents, yeah, subhanAllah, how awesome it would be for me to be able to go back and be able to spend that time and to take that knowledge from those that have passed away.
No doubt.
Take this time and spend it. We can run after money later on, right? And we shouldn't run after money, but we can earn money later on. This is a time that Allah has given us. Spend it with our family, inshallah.
That was a very decent answer, and I think it covered a lot of the points there. So, Jazakallah khair. Charles, if you agree, can we take some other questions as well, so that we're up to date on the questions, and then we can go into the Ghusl aspect. Some of them actually lap over with what we've discussed. So, the second question is, what happens if a person dies alone at home? I'm not sure where this question is going, so I'm going to leave it up to you two to interpret how best to answer that.
Okay, so very, very, very valid question. Okay, because in this current state and time, nobody knows who's home and who's not. But everyone should be home, obviously, unless you're a frontline worker. But we've had several cases in the last 10 years. We've had 5 cases, you could say, where people have passed away at home, and no one's known that they passed away at home. Okay, so this is very difficult. Now, as a community, Sheikh will come in here, we do have a duty of care. Okay, whether your neighbor is Muslim or non-Muslim, we have a duty of care to our neighbors, and it's very important. I mean, we've had cases, subhanallah, where someone has been found after being home for over 25, 30 days. I wouldn't. It's not even. You don't want to hear. What these people look like. I can just just touch on that. So that is something that is a duty of care upon us in this time, to make sure. There's various people that I talk to, just for the sake of talking to them. Okay, there's some old ladies, mashallah, and I always say to them, that your du'as are our fuel, and we constantly have those conversations. And I think that is something the Sheikh can probably touch on now, and it's a very, very important question.
About dying alone?
About the duty of the neighbours.
Check up on people.
Yeah. So I mean,
people don't.
No, I'm sorry, it cut out a little bit, so I didn't hear part of that. But the thing is, look, there's and we know this because there's a program that we've instilled in the masjid every Ramadan, right? And every Eid we go out for Eid, right at the end of Ramadan. Actually, not at the end of Ramadan, the last Sunday of Ramadan, because that's the last class that we hold, where we go and we deliver chocolates to our neighbors. And we'll have a full topic on who is your neighbor, what you should do, and the duty of care to the neighbors. But you should knock on the door and find out how your neighbor is. Not knock on the door, but at least contact them. So right before we went into lockdown, I made sure that we went to all of our neighbors down our street and we got everyone's number. And subhanallah, what I realized was majority of the neighbors that are down my street are elderly, right? And they were so worried. And I'll never forget when we went and we said, "Do you need anything?" And one of the neighbors, she's a physician as well. And she said to me, she said, "Well, we're not going to be able to go shopping. Would it be a burden for me to ask you to go shopping?" Now, to brighten her spirits up, I said, "Look, I don't mind doing shopping for you, but I can't buy alcohol or pork for you." And she started laughing, But subhanallah, the very next day, she wrote a letter to us and she put it in the box and she said, "Can you please get me long stay milk?" Right? "Can you get me a carton of long stay milk? Because we're in for 12 weeks."
Mm-hmm.
Now we still text our neighbors because in case they pass away, because my neighbor to my right, before the new neighbor came in, actually passed away and was there for 3 or 4 days. We got suspicious that because the person was deaf, he couldn't hear. So we were like, we haven't seen him come out. Something is going on. So check on your neighbors, text them, call them. If they don't answer, call the authorities or have contact with their families so that you can contact them and say, "Hey, we don't see them," right? Because you don't want where someone passes away and they stay in for a long time. That's number one. The other thing is respect your neighbors, right? Have that duty of care. If someone does pass away, that's your neighbor, give them condolences. Don't observe social distancing, but give your condolences to them, whether they're Muslim or non-Muslim. That may be a means of them, if they're non-Muslim, of taking Hidayah, accepting Islam, and coming close and understanding what is Islam, inshallah. Right when I say that, I hear sirens going off in the background.
Yeah, I hear them on your side. Sorry.
Go ahead. No, go ahead. Go ahead with the question.
It comes in two parts. So the first part of the question is where and how Ghusl will be performed if the deceased is COVID positive or COVID negative. So I think they're trying to get at, does the procedure remain the same? And I suspect it does. And the second part of the question is, and are there provisions for females in the community to perform that Ghusl? And I assume that there are, but I think Brother Shahid, you're best placed to answer on this front.
Okay, so this is probably, Sheikh, a good time for them to talk about the work that's been done in Bristol. Alhamdulillah, we've had an executive panel that's been tasked, chaired by Amjad Ali, who's been looking at this whole scenario of the position of the masjids, as well as the ulama and the community, deaf committees, and all people of responsibility who step up at a time of need, such as death, in this current situation. Now, this group has consulted every masjid in Bristol. I believe there's 17 in total, which majority of them have been attending all the meetings. Some of them have not, however, they have been kept informed. Now, the position we have in Bristol is very clear, really, to be honest. the masajid have decided at this current present moment in time, based on guidance available to them from Public Health England as well as World Health Organization, that they feel they're not in a position, repeat, not in a position to allow us to use their facilities for ghusl. Okay, so at this present moment in time, Bristol does not have a viable option for ghusl. And I understand some people are on the call from south of the country all the way down to the bottom of the country. And I believe there is a similar issue there, because obviously you can appreciate this is the next biggest town for them, from Land's End all the way up to the middle of the country. This is the first major town they come across, and I understand them to be in the same position. So at this present moment in time, there's one more update we're waiting for next week. There is some talk about us trying to get provision which is remote, because in this predicament, when we don't have access to massages, we have ghusl facilities in the hospitals, which we've supported, alhamdulillah, to create. But those, due to the restrictions, have also been switched off due to the infection risks, as well as obviously the people being a risk as well. So at this present moment in time, the final stage report, which we're meeting with the masajid yesterday, it still remains the same. There's no masjid willing at this present moment to open, and we don't have any facilities at all. So the janazah that have occurred, some people have been fortunate enough to be able to carry ghusl out in their premises, and they have exceptional premises. We are all not blessed with that. Okay, others have gone down the route of tayammum, and Sheikh can talk about that in a second, inshallah, on the ulama, the BSSI fatwa, as well as there's various others, Mufti Faiz Rasul as well. And so there's a few guidance notes we have here for a community. So at the present moment in time, when someone passes away of COVID or non-COVID, we do not actually physically have ghusl facilities within Bristol and the surrounding areas. Okay, so tayammum is encouraged. There is differences of opinion on the type of tayammum that can be carried out, whether it's dry or whether it's wet. And also there's differences of opinion on whether it can be carried out on top of a body bag. Okay, so instead of exposing, because in a lot of cases we've collected, I'm sure other funeral directors as well, mayyit, and the body bag has been sealed and is being sealed shut, and under no circumstances are we allowed to open it. Now, the World Health Organization, Public Health England, constantly changing their guidance on this, and it's created that sort of uncertainty. For example, today they're telling us that we can reuse our PPE equipment. Okay, now you can see where this is all going. Okay, because I mean, you know, 1 minute you're telling us it's a major issue, the next minute you're telling us it was scaling it down. 1 minute you're telling us is you don't need to have a mask. Now you know, we've got taxi drivers unfortunately affected. We've lost some in London. We've had many people infected here. So it's a very grey area. And also people doing the ghusl, you know, this is a vessel which can transmit. Now we're at the very early stages of this, even internationally, because as you know, research takes a long time to procure. Now, some countries are of the opinion that it takes 3 days before you can collect the bag and it must be refrigerated. Others release straight away. Some are releasing with a body bag. Some are saying there's no need for a body bag. So look, medical professionals, people on the front line, you know, have gone a little bit doolally with this particular issue, because we don't know if we're coming or going. But to be honest with you, what has it actually produced within the frontline services is a lack of trust. Okay, so information we are receiving, do we trust it? Not really. No, not as far as we can throw it. So, end of the day, there is a clear and present risk, because look, we are presented with a mayyat who has passed away. Right now, in a lot of cases with the COVID, they passed away of COVID. So it's quite difficult for me to sit there and tell you that this vessel is not going to transmit any disease or anything. Now, this is what Sheikh was talking about earlier as well. So in this area of ghusl, it is something we would like to see happen, because not everyone is of the opinion that tayammum is the best option. However, you know, Sheikh will go into that, I'm sure, but it's an option that Allah has given us. But when we get that facility available, and I can assure you there are people looking at that, engaging with the masajid as well as our own storage facilities in Bristol City Council, whether they can bolt on a facility which is not only for Muslims, which can be used by other faiths as well in preparation of the mayat. But I must tell you at this point that to what we said earlier on about everyone being potentially a risk. Okay, to the funeral director, the biggest risk is the family, so we have to keep our social distancing. And when you see someone you know and they've loved someone who's passed away, then of course I want to give you a hug and you know and even take it to the next level of providing that emotional support. But we can't. We have to social distance. I had one the other day when auntie passed away and uncle was there, and I was in tears. I got to be honest. Underneath my PPE, I was teary, but I couldn't console him. I couldn't hug him, and I just opened my hands and said, "Listen, this is what I have for you." SubhanAllah. So you must appreciate when we're doing ghusl, only those people that are medically, I wouldn't say medically qualified, but they need to be thoroughly trained in PPE. And there's a method of putting PPE on, personal protective equipment, and there's a method of taking it off. Okay, and the facility itself has to meet a certain criteria. The ventilation has to be proper, the surfaces must be smooth, it must be able to be cleaned with minimum risk of transmission, because we've got to go back and reverse up and remember COVID-19, the same thing that we're saying, hey, my pen could be infected, because treat everything that you have as infected. So we have to make sure it's clean before we do this, and so this is the way we need to look at this thing. So the answer for your question on ghusl at this present moment is tayammum is our current position on it. Okay, and I'm sure will inshallah elaborate on that. However, if there is a opportunity for you to do ghusl without putting the mayyit into a position of difficulty or strain, okay, then there are ways, which Sheikh will discuss with you, which you can do that, but you must consider the impact for the deceased and the people surrounding. Under no circumstances should you prioritize life over death. We have a duty of care. And Sheikh, if I hand over to you at this point, is that good?
Yeah, yeah. In terms of, I think the question was in three parts actually.
Okay.
The first question was that where and how will ghusl be performed for the deceased that are COVID positive and COVID negative,
Okay, that's
which we covered. Are there provisions for females in the community or family to perform ghusl for the female deceased? There are sisters that are trained up in performing the ghusl, but the ones that I know are elderly. And I think this time actually highlights the fact for those of us that are young, that are not 50 plus and are within, between 18 all the way up until 50 or 55, we've got to step up. We have to step up. We need to get involved in the process of burying those that have passed away. Don't wait till it hits your doorstep. Then you're scrambling to understand, how am I going to do the ghusl? For example, my mother-in-law, who's above the age of coming out, being able to come out, has been performing ghusl for years. I mean, she's in her 70s, right? And she still goes to perform ghusl. May Allah give her long life. But we need to train up our young sisters, our young brothers, to be able to perform the ghusl, because if we lose someone that essential to the community, we're going to have issues, right? You're going to then struggle in how is the ghusl going to take place. So this is a wonderful opportunity for us as a community in Bristol to come together and to teach our youngers, those that are younger than us, how to do ghusl, and have them come in and learn the process, understand the process, be there for a few ghusl, right? Now, I just saw a question that came up. What is my stance on the funeral discussion? I am part of the BBSI in the UK. I am actually an executive director of the BBSI and a trustee member. I sit on the council. The BBSI has written a guideline on what to do in terms of, it's a guideline. It's not a fatwa. It's a guideline on what to do when someone passes away, whether COVID positive, COVID negative. Should ghusl be done? Should ghusl not be done? And we publish that. It's a group of 300 some odd scholars that come with a background of whether, and I don't like classifying myself, I don't classify myself, but others do, that come from the background of being Barelvi or Deobandi or Sufi or Wahhabi or Salafi. We have everyone from various different backgrounds. And Alhamdulillah, we all came to a consensus. That consensus is not the only guidance that was issued, right? For example, right now, and everyone is on Facebook, everyone is on WhatsApp, everyone is on Instagram, and what's the other one? I think Snapchat and Twitter. Twitter. Uh, Everyone's on social media, so we've got everyone just typing out and saying, "Oh, by the way, we're doing this," right? So within our guidelines, we said that those that are okay to do the ghusl for COVID positive patients, you must follow the strict guidelines of wearing protective gear and doing PPE, knowing that there is a low risk of possible transmission, not from the dead body, but from picking up something from the hospital when you pick up the body and you come in and doing the transport and everything and on the bag. Maybe if you do not, if you do not have the proper gear, there's possibility, right? Because we know that the disease stays is it does not die off for at least 9 hours on plastic. That's one view, okay? And I'm specifically focusing on COVID positive right now, so that's one view. The second view is that the European Council of Fatwa said that based on even the hadith that I mentioned about, a diseased camel should not be placed into an area where there's undiseased camels. So they utilize that fatwa, saying that sanctity of human life, if there's even a small risk, that ghusl should not be done for a COVID positive deceased person, right? Alhamdulillah, that's another view, right? And I believe that we should not. I'm not. My stance is when I put something in writing or when I say something and I'm backing it, I must do it myself. Okay, so I put my mouth where my words are, if I can possibly do that. So have I done ghusl on a COVID positive? Yes, I have. Right? Did I perform janazah for them? Yes, I did. But that is my choice, right? I did that because I was asked to do that. I cannot impose that on Brother Shahid or on Brother Ahmed or anyone else, nor does any other scholar have the right to impose that onto anyone else because you cannot put someone in a position where they're not comfortable and they are scared that they may contract the disease, right? And this is where you have the other fatwa coming from the European Council of Fatwa. Alhamdulillah, they said, no, don't even do tayammum, right? Because doing tayammum means that you still have to open the bag and you still have to do the wiping over the face and the arms. That, for some medical doctors, and there's no clear cut medical advice, if someone says there's low risk, there's a risk, right? So that fatwa becomes valid where they say no ghusl and place them inside of the grave. If you take, not if you take personally, but if your city and the community in your city has decided, as we have in Bristol, that no ghusl will take place for COVID positive deceased, then we should not attack the funeral directors nor the masajids for saying, oh, because there was a comment that was passed where they said, oh, but you know what? I paid for this masjid, or I donated towards this masjid, or I donated towards this burial ghusl area. Yeah, but you're not the one whose life is at risk, right? So both fatwas are valid. Now, what our guidance has said is you need to go and you need to go by the guidance of your masjid. Now, we had a community discussion, right? With the community discussion that we had, the masjid, the those that were appointed by the masjid, or I hope they were appointed by the masjid, those that have influence in their communities and in their masjid, we were all gathered, and alhamdulillah, it was excellent how the community came together for the first time. And I can't say this is going to happen for the moon sighting, but just to lighten the things up. But for the first time in the time that I was there, we have come to an agreement. And I said, whatever the shura is, I will support. I may have different views, you may have different views, but we must support the community decision as one because we are one, right? Now the question comes for COVID negative, those that are COVID negative. Now, the problem that we're coming into, and I'm going to say this for the community as a whole, those that are COVID positive, I mean, those that are COVID negative, if they come, right, to the masjid and we open up the masjids have voiced concern saying that, look, we're inside of a neighborhood. If you come in with a bunch of PPE, you're going to scare the neighborhood and they're going to say, "Oh my god, what's going on? You're going to spread disease, or if something breaks out, we're going to be sued." That's number 1. They said, and if something happens or if they did have COVID and it was described as COVID negative, we're held liable. So based off of that, the masjids have said we're going to take the safe route and we're going to keep the masjid closed and the ghusl facilities, because all the ghusl facilities are inside of the masjid. They said we're going to decide that we're going to keep the masjids closed and no ghusl is going to be given for COVID positive or negative. Then it comes to the question, right? And it actually comes, it's a call to action. Myself, what I suggest that we want to give ghusl. I want to give ghusl to those that are COVID negative, right? I would love to do that. But because of the conditions that are there, just like I know Brother Shahid has said to me, he doesn't mind giving ghusl to those that are COVID negative, but we don't have the facilities to be able to do that. So here's my call to action, Bristol. We need to come together. We need to protect the sanctity of the masjid and protect the masjid in itself in terms of backlash if we do ghusl there. We need to build our own external ghusl facility that will have negative air pressure, that will have the ability to store the water that we have used that may be contaminated, utilizing electroviolet light to kill off any disease, that has the ability to have an aerosol base disinfectant that comes down, that disinfects everything. We need to put our money into and resources into those to be able to do that. So please, I am telling you, from my perspective, what my stance is we have decided as a community. I am not going to personally go and say I think we should do this. No, we did shura, and the sunnah of the shura is you decide what is going to happen, and we will stick to that, and we will deal with that. Now, if we do get the bolt-on facility, all of the community members that were engaged in this conversation sit back down on the table and we start those discussions on how to deal with the situation at hand. Right now, we don't have a ghusl facility to be able to perform this. Brother Shahid, you mentioned that some people have facilities in their own homes. You know, my suggestion, in all honesty, most bathtubs are not that big. Corners are not coming. If you accidentally mishandle that body and bruises start to appear on that body, Abdulaziz, you are a lawyer, right? You're a legal advisor, counsel. This could potentially put you in problems. Don't do something that you're thinking you're going to do good to help your family member out, and then you end up getting yourself in trouble. Perform tayammum if they're in the same home as you know, using water. Perform the tayammum with water because Allah knows the condition that you're in. You're not doing anything wrong to your family member in a time of pandemic. This is a very ajib, very different situation that we're in. We all need to be one as a community and not one masjid. Please, I'm begging you, to the masajids that are watching. If you've been part of that discussion, don't break off from the agreement that has been made, right? My position, I have a personal position, I will keep to myself. But the decision that has been made, don't break off. Or don't say, oh, you see, it's their fault. They're doing it. Or to one up someone. I'm doing it. They're not. No. We are one ummah. وَاعْتَصِمُوا بِحَبْلِ اللَّهِ جَمِيعًا وَلَا تَفَرَّقُوا. Hold on to the rope of Allah as one and do not differentiate. So please, I am begging you for the sake of Allah, stick with the communal advice that has been given. And inshallah, if we have good niyyah and we open up our hearts, Allah will make it where we will have a separate facility that when we come into these issues, we will be prepared and we will build that facility specifically for that. And it's no one's fault. We are all in this together and we will all come out of this together and stronger, inshallah.
Inshallah.
Jazakallah. Brother Shahid, I'm sorry I took up a lot of time, but I wanted to make sure that that was addressed.
No,
It's
no,
a very important issue. It's a very important
very important issue and very detailed answer. So we've got 15 minutes left, so we're going to power through just a couple more questions, and then I'll ask you to both give some final closing words, if that's all right.
Yeah.
So the next question is, how do people give condolences? Do any of you have any advice on the best way to say Fatiha and the whole process behind that?
Okay. Sheikh, you want to start with that one? Do you want me to? Because obviously, as you know, in the current climate, we got these devices and we have, alhamdulillah, Allah's blessed them with lots of technology. And if I just give you a couple examples, so families have been instrumental enough. Obviously, this is an option, so it's not. If I'm talking about the janazah as well, incorporating the whole thing with social media. So if you can't attend the janazah, you can set up a Facebook stream, a Skype stream. There's various different things we can use, and you can decide who can see that, okay, and who doesn't see it. So it doesn't have to be an international thing, because a lot of people look at this thing and think, oh, subhanAllah, it's so sad. Look, someone's passed away, and there's a handful of people here. It's tragic. I mean, you never envisage this. So that's the first option that can be done. And now the same sort of technology can be used for live chat rooms. I know Dr. Sahel, I'll be pleased with him. We set one up recently for one of the uncles that passed away, a Skype chat room, when they gave us the times it was open, and also some other families as well. So what happened is those set times, the family were there, people logged on from the link that was shared with them, and they gave their condolences. They could, if they wanted to activate the video like we have ours here, so the family could see them, they could make dua together, they could send them messages of support. So alhamdulillah, this has assisted us in this tragic time. And I think the condolences is a massive part of our deen and the sunnah, obviously, where we have to actually provide support for people, And if you go back a little bit, let some people say, you got to look at the positive sides and the negative sides of any event. And obviously that in itself poses a lot of new questions on how we used to do things, going around and, and everyone's having a cup of tea. That's not the way it should be done. We shouldn't be a burden on a family who's just lost somebody. We should be quite the opposite. We should be removing their burdens, providing them with love, support, dua, and everything that they would possibly expect from a member of their own family, and that's how this ummah can work together on that, inshallah.
Shahid, you just mentioned something very important, and I'll just give 2 minutes on this. When you do ta'ziyah or ziyarah, which is visitation, the focus on doing the ziyarah should be that you go and you give condolences and not be it a burden, which is something very important you mentioned. I have gone to so many ziyarahs, and unfortunately, everyone is talking and chattering, sitting around. Households are having to cook food because they're coming around when someone else should actually cook food and send it because they're grieving and they're going through the difficulty. But then we're sitting around, not a lot of people, I don't want to say everyone, but they sit around and they talk about, oh, today I did this, or have you seen this, or talking about sports when someone's just passed away. But you know what Allah's done in this situation? He's made it where you're doing ta'ziyah online, you're coming in, you don't have the chance to sit around and chit-chat. You come in, you make your dua, you give your condolences, and you leave. right? That is the positive that we are seeing, that the true essence of the Sunnah is now being implemented in the way we should be. And we should carry this on after we get out of this craziness, inshallah.
Yeah, that's subhanAllah. It's a very important issue. And obviously, it just reiterates that we have a duty of care to support people in this predicament of losing a loved one for any period, now or non-COVID or COVID. But subhanAllah, due to the nature of what's happening, this is why social media has been adapted and people can use it. But just bear in mind, not everybody wants a janazah with just a handful of people, to be streamed. Okay, so I had one family said, "Look, no, I don't want it," so we switched it off. We didn't share it. Okay, yeah.
Let me tell you something, right? Yeah. I want everyone's homework. This is your homework. Go read the story of Abu Dhar al-Ghifari. Abu Dhar al-Ghifari, an amazing, amazing Sahaba. Amazing. Read how he passed away and read how many people attended his ghusl and read about what Rasulullah said about him. Go do that. And then you'll understand that there were only six Sahaba that were there. His wife brought his body out to the side of the road, had him shrouded up. And the Abdullah ibn Zubayr and his companions are walking by and they see this. And she says, "Oh, are you Muslims?" And they said, "Yes, we're Muslims." And she said, "Can you give ghusl to my husband?" Because Rasulullah said that, "Oh, Abu Dhar, you were alone and standing firm and you will die alone." And he died alone, right? This is Abu Dhar al-Ghifari, and he had 6 people attending the janazah, but you don't know how many malaikas that were there attending this, right? So don't look at numbers in these type of times. Look at what we're going through, because the person that passes away with the pandemic in this time is considered a shaheed, right? So this is why I'm saying we need to look at things from a positive perspective and be strong, inshallah.
Inshallah.
Inshallah. Taking things to a more practical note, someone's asked how much a burial costs for Muslims here in Bristol. Uncle Shad, can you provide some clarity on this?
Yes, I can. So basically, the plot costs in Bristol, whether you're in South Bristol or in Memorial Woodlands, the actual cost of the plot in Memorial Woodlands, Meadows of Peace, which is the Muslim section, is £1,449. That's the only place one can pre-purchase a plot. You can't pre-purchase in South Bristol because of the close proximity of the graves. If you have 6 there, how do you get to number 4, which is now been surrounded? Whereas Meadows has a spacing system per grave, and it has a road on the front and the back. Now, when you need to use that grave, then they charge you a digging fee. The digging fee always changes. Okay, so at the moment it's £800. So you've got 1,449 plus £800 plus whatever your funeral director costs are, which range from anywhere from 700 to 900 or more, depending on what is required and what's not required. However, at this present moment in time, we're obviously encouraging this most simplest of funerals. Even if we look at how non-Muslims do things, they're normally done in a very different manner, and there's various protocols and suits and all of this stuff. All this, even under this predicament pandemic, is being banned. Okay, so even the traditional English funeral directors are doing exactly the same as us, and they're in full PP3 and they're collecting and they're boxing in a sealed container box, and they're transporting directly most times straight to the cemetery. Okay, so that's a question there. South Bristol, I've just had a price rise, so I think it's about £150 difference. Okay, however, there's a very important element that opens up here about a council-run cemetery and a non-council-run cemetery. Okay, now the council cemetery, if you're within the Bristol district boundary, so for example, if you're in Bradley Stoke, you're not in the Bristol district. Okay, so you will kind of come under South Gloss or North Somerset. Okay, so if you were to bury in South Bristol, where there's around about 450 people buried at this present moment in time, there's a few hundred graves there. There's no shortage of graves here, by the way, guys, right? In either cemetery or in Bristol. But if you were to come out of district and bury there, then you would pay around £1,000 extra. This is something the council introduced across the country, the government introduced, and it encourages people to be buried in their own areas instead of transporting people here and there. It's all well and good, providing you have facilities. We're dealing with people as far as Exeter, Torquay, down south, Yeovil, all these places, and alhamdulillah, some of them are getting closer to that, but they don't have dedicated facilities. So a lot of them are coming to Bristol. Now, in that scenario, we would then move across to the Meadows of Peace, which is a privately owned cemetery. It doesn't matter what district you're from, what area you're from, what your postcode is, there's no additional fees. Okay, so alhamdulillah, that for people that are out of town, and even for some people that live in town, they find that is a better option for them.
Sure.
I said to you earlier on, I mean, I personally wouldn't buy a plot of land without seeing it. Okay, obviously, if I had that opportunity to do that, I would strongly encourage people. Bearing in mind, cemeteries are now closed, so you can go online, ask people that already purchased there. So cost-wise, it's around 3,500 or less, depending on which site you go to. Okay, and there's one more other important element here. South Bristol Council or Bristol City Council would charge a weekend fee of around £500 additional to run on a weekend, whereas the Meadows would not as well. Okay, so there's a lot of things that make the Meadows of Peace slightly more attractive, and the model for Meadows of Peace is basically the Gardens of Peace in London. Okay, that is, I think, what they're trying to achieve over a long period of time. A lot of people, such as Tariq Samad and Marmin Chaudhry Aziz, a lot of people have done a lot of work with this. I personally wasn't involved in the inception of this, and Sister Roxana project, but however, the way we see it is our clients and whatever they want, and obviously we have to provide, and obviously we try and make it as simple and streamlined as possible. Both of them have 7-day access, by the way, from next weekend, from coming. So we don't have an issue with graves. We're not going to run out of graves. Okay, there's over 10,000 in Meadows, and there's, I think, access to over 800 in South Bristol. So guys, don't panic about graves, okay? And the system, everything is there and it is in place.
Yeah.
Okay, Sheikh Feroz, would you be so kind as to give us some final closing words?
Inshallah. So in summarizing what we have discussed today, the aspect of having anxiety and fear, the first thing that we should know is that as Muslims, we're all going to pass away eventually, right? We should prepare ourselves. Like Brother Shahid has mentioned, you're looking at a cost of roughly about £3,500 for your own burial to be done. Start to save money towards that and put it into a fund so that when you do pass away, you're not leaving a burden onto your family. That's number one. The second aspect is in terms of prepare yourselves for the time when your death is written. Prepare your wills, prepare your family mentally, spiritually. Also, prepare your own akhirah. Do good, enjoy good, give sadaqah. Sadaqah is charity. Make sure you pay your zakah, which is a fard, which is an obligation. Make sure you do good. Make sure you take care of your neighbors, your parents. Make sure you maintain relations of kin. Do all of these things so that at the time when death comes, alhamdulillah, you will meet your Lord. Where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He says, ارجعي إلى ربك راضية مرضية فادخلي في عبادي وادخلي جنتي. That come back to me, O my slave, come back to me, and فادخلي في عبادي, enter my slave into Jannah. Right? Let's prepare ourselves for doing that. The third, which I think is what I call the hot topic, and the most important thing is that the masjids in Bristol that have the ghusl facilities, based off of consultation that they had, whether it was legal optics, whether it was looking at community, whether it was talking about from the perspective of do we have the ability to, are we set up to be able to do the ghusl, whether it's positive or negative, they have decided that we will not carry forward. And my suggestion to everyone in Bristol, whether you have a different opinion or not, this is a communal decision that has taken place. If we're upset with that, we should not take it out on the funeral directors or the masjids. This was a communal decision based off of what the current conditions are present in Bristol. Rather than being upset, we should reverse this and say that call to action. We're going to make a change and we're going to make a positive change. We're going to take the sanctity of the masjid. We're going to remove the ghusl, the burial, or the ghusl facilities out of the masjid, and we're going to have one community ghusl facility that should be run by an organization, not for profit organization. And we're going to keep it open to everyone, not just select people, and make sure we have all the provisions in the future for what we're facing right now. This is a chance for us to get our ship in order, get our house in order. So let's go ahead and get our house in order. So don't blame anyone. Don't go and get angry with anyone if you have a different opinion. Be one community. We're going into the month of Ramadan. We must go into the month of Ramadan with a clean heart, positive, forward thinking way. How can I make a decision? How can I make a difference in not just my community, but if we implement something that is going to be a model for the rest of the world, it's going to be amazing. It is going to be amazing because we will be a means for people to adopt that aspect. Last thing that I want to say is those that have passed away and those that we know have passed away, support them through the phone. Support them. We have FaceTime and hijab for those that are non-mahram, but support our community. Support not just Muslims, but also your non-Muslims, right? This is what a Muslim, the essence of being a Muslim is. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala guide us. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protect us. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala keep us on the right path. May, if we have made a mistake in any decisions as a community that we have made, may Allah forgive us because we did not intend to make that decision. Our intention was to please Allah, and it is still to please Allah. It was not one person that made that decision. So may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, as we say, Ya muqallib al-qulub, thabbit qulubana ala dinik. Oh Allah, open our heart and guide it towards your deen and allow us to follow ihdina sirat al-mustaqim, that path that is straight. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala forgive us. May Allah protect us. May Allah remove the difficulty that is on the world right now. Bestow His rahmah and His mercy upon us. And may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allow us to come out stronger so that we can be one and act as if we are one. Inshallah. And I want to say to everyone, for the sake of Allah, I love every single person that is here. If I have done anything or said anything, please forgive me. Right? I have no ill intent if I've done anything wrong or said anything wrong to anyone, even in expressing my own views. This is not a time where we should have harshness. There is no one that I have anger towards. I love you guys for the sake of Allah, and I ask that you do the same for me. And my dua is for everyone. Jazakallah al-khair to the brothers that have put this together. BMCS, you're doing a wonderful job. Abdulaziz, you're doing a wonderful job. Shahid, you're the face of Ummah Funerals, but the other, Sister Ruxana, everyone behind her, everyone behind you, the Amirs and the Hassans and the Saids, everyone behind you guys. May Allah bless you, allow you guys to carry on with the good work that you're doing. Those that are in the front lines, whether they're the NHS workers, whether they're imams dealing with stressful situations, whether there are people that are going out and collecting and delivering food. May Allah bless everyone, and even those that are self-isolating. May Allah bless you for protecting others so that this disease will not spread. May Allah accept. ربنا تقبل منا إنك أنت السميع العليم تب علينا يا مولانا إنك أنت التواب الرحيم اللهم صل وسلم على سيدنا ومولانا محمد النبي الأمي وعلى آله وصحبه وبارك وسلم سبحان ربك رب العزة عما يصفون وسلام على المرسلين والحمد لله رب العالمين آمين 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 ثم آمين جزاك الله خير.
Tuning in, Jazakallah khair, Sheikh Feroz, for his kind words, his wisdom, his knowledge. Jazakallah khair to Uncle Shahid. Honestly, we learned so much from you about the procedures and practicalities that are involved with burials and ghusl. The whole community applauds you and thanks you for your help during this very strange time. Viewers, on Tuesday, the 21st of April, you'll see the second part of the Welcome Ramadan series. That will be hosted by my brother, Ijazdeen, and inshallah, Sheikh Feroz, will you be speaking at that one as well?
Yeah, I've been invited to that, inshallah, and we're also planning on doing a program every single night. I don't know if we're going to use the BMCS platform. We're going to decide as a community, inshallah. But we will be doing programs every night in Ramadan. Also, the Sunday programs, the Sunday courses that Allah's blessed me to allow to teach, they will carry on. Every Sunday we will have the courses. This year I've been requested to bring back the dua course that we did back in 2011, I think it was. We will go ahead and do that course and maybe another course as well since we're all at home. So everyone tune in. Jazakallah khair, man. You were a wonderful host, and Jazakallah khair. It's always a pleasure to share a platform with you.
Yeah, Jazakallah khair, brothers.
Thank you.
Take care. Assalamu alaikum.